The following is an Alabama News Network sports special. The Alabama Crimson Tide, the Auburn Tigers, two bitter rivals with one mission: to take home bragging rights of the biggest game of the regular season. Alabama is chasing dreams of a consecutive national championship. Auburn's dream is to be the spoiler. It's Iron Bowl 2021. Now, here are Adam Solomon and John Longshore.
That's right. Welcome to our Iron Bowl special, 1 hour of everything Alabama and Auburn as we get ready for this afternoon's matchup. And joining me, as you heard for this hour, John Longshore. And later we'll hear from sports reporter Chris Adams-Wall. John, though, it's an Iron Bowl without Pat Dye. It's an Iron Bowl that will see both head coaches after 2020 saw Saban away from the game because of COVID issues. And, of course, Gus Malzahn left Auburn. So, John, it's already, some would say, a unique Iron Bowl before one snap's even been played.
Yeah, it really will be, Adam. You mentioned Coach Dye. He's the reason the Iron Bowl is being played at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Way back in 1989 was the first time it ever happened. It'll happen again today in a couple of hours, and I'm telling you, you can feel the excitement building.
Now here's what you can expect over the next hour. Hear from Alabama's Nick Saban, Auburn's Brian Harsin, a number of players from both teams, breakdowns of everything offense and defense for both teams as well. Look at the quarterback position, which is a very different conversation depending on which team we're talking about. A review of Harsin's first season, college football implications should Alabama win or lose, and a full season breakdown of how we got to this point, both teams. A fun look back at the highlights from throughout the year, full predictions as well. Now, John, it goes without saying that this is one of the biggest rivalries in all of sports. Great endings, meaningful wins and losses, and in the college football playoff era, big implications. Here's a look at the tail of the tape for the 2021 edition of the Iron Bowl. The 86th meeting all-time of this series, dating back to 1893. Alabama does lead the series 47-37-1, but Auburn has a 10-5 lead on the Plains. Now, last time we saw these two square up, it was pretty one-sided in Tuscaloosa last year, a 42-14 Crimson Tide win. Here's Nick Saban and Brian Harsin on the rivalry.
As far as the Iron Bowl goes, I told the players this too. I'm excited to coach in this game. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to be at Auburn. Go back before I was ever part of this program. The Iron Bowl has been a game that everybody's watched. Everybody knows Auburn, Alabama are playing. If you have a chance and you can get on and watch the game, if you're coaching, if it's a time that, for us at Boise, we had the latest game, so you could always get a chance to watch these games. And, it's one that everybody knows who's playing in it. And, something that you sit there and you think how cool that is, to have a chance for those guys to go out there and play in a rivalry game like this. And now to be here, I told our players I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to coach in the game.
As you well know, the Iron Bowl is one of the best rivalries in the country. There's a lot of people in this state and all over the nation that have great interest in this game. A lot of people have a lot of passion for their schools, which is what makes this rivalry what it is. And, it's always a difficult place to play on the road when you go down to Jordan-Hare Stadium. So this is something that our players are going to have to really have a lot of respect for and do a great job of preparing.
Now, before we get to it, John, where does this one stack up? Obviously, in terms of both teams being on top of their game, Auburn is not at the moment, but it could be interesting with Alabama not being so good on the road this year. And, of course, Auburn quarterback T.J. Finley with another chance to show what he's made of.
Well, I think, Adam, it's pretty common knowledge Alabama's had some issues at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Coach Saban talked about the difficulty of playing there, the excitement, the noise, the electricity. But Alabama's got to win if they want to stay in the college football playoff conversation. Losing to Auburn, they're out. There's some people that think they could lose to Auburn and beat Georgia and still get in. I'm not so sure. I think a lot of dominoes would have to fall for that to happen. And there again, you don't want to lose to your in-state rival. You want to have as much dominance over them as you possibly can. As for Brian Harsin, wow, Adam, he goes without saying. With the way the season has already played out, if you could beat the number 3 team in America, Alabama, and kind of dampen their hopes, kind of knock them out of a national championship race, that would be outstanding. Also, Adam, it would go a long way in the off-season for Brian Harsin if he could win this football game.
The fan base could overlook some of the other games in the season result. It's time for our first break coming up. We're talking X's and O's. We'll turn our attention to the Alabama and Auburn offenses. Hear from both teams straight ahead.
You're watching Iron Bowl 2021, an Alabama News Network sports special. Once again, Adam Solomon and John Longshore.
Welcome back to Iron Bowl 2021, an hour's worth of full coverage of the big game today. John Longshore is still with me. And John, now we're going to talk a little offense for both teams. First, Alabama, second in yards per game, second in passing yards per game. The one that really stands out, 10th in rushing. It just really hasn't been there in the SEC this season. First in points per game, so it is still an Alabama offense.
Yeah. The Iron Bowl is always been a staple of college football for a while. So me even being from California and not being in the South, that still I'd always known about it, always heard about it. It's always something that's been talked about nationally. So it's something I was well aware of. Even as growing up and being a young college football fan, I'm in California. So and then now being in it. And obviously being a part of it and seeing how much it means to everyone, seeing how much it means to us, coach, staff, players, everyone around the building. It definitely it resonates even deeper than when I was back home.
John, the rushing game isn't there, but when you have a quarterback and receivers and Jameson Williams competing for national awards at the end of the season, you can probably make do.
Well, you can, Adam, and I'm not sure Alabama comes into this game with just one loss if it's not for Bryce Young.
Sure.
I think he is certainly the glue that is holding this offense together. He's got some great weapons. You mentioned John Mechie III, Jameson Williams, Brian Robinson. Those guys are the go-to. The tight end has also been a big part of this offense as well, but Alabama's got to score to beat most teams because the defense hadn't been playing up to Nick Saban standards.
Let's go to Auburn now. Really middle of the road across the board. Let's take a look at the numbers here. 8th in total yards per game, 7th in passing, 8th in rushing, 10th in points, at third just over 30. And if they're facing a normal Alabama defense, this game probably would look more lopsided.
And all week I told all the receivers, the whole receiver group, I said, always expect the ball. On that touchdown pass to D-Rob, we never ran that play in practice where I threw it. And I told D-Rob before the play started, I said, expect the ball. I said, always expect the ball. The ball can come out at any time. So I preach to all the receivers, always expect the ball. It's the same thing this week. It's the same motto, always expect the ball because anything can happen. We run a lot of RPOs and things of that nature. So, pop passes and bubbles and screens like that, just always expect the ball. And when you get the tight ends involved, that makes the defense respect every aspect of the field. Tight ends have mismatches sometimes. Tight ends go against the buck linebackers, they go against free safeties and things like that. So getting the tight ends involved would be very important in this game. And I didn't realize we didn't throw in the tight ends any passes. We threw Shanker one pass that, I kind of sailed over his head a little bit. But, getting the tight ends involved this game will be very important for us, a big key to success.
Well, John, I'd say something's got to give. The Alabama defense with struggles at times or the Auburn offense with struggles at times.
Well, I think it all goes back to what we've talked about so much this year, Adam. It is Auburn's offensive line. If they're not protecting the quarterback, opening up holes for the running backs, it's going to be difficult for this offense to move the chains and to get into the offense. That video clip we played just during that last clip with TJ Finley, we saw a lot of number 4, Tank Bigsby.
Sure.
I think he's going to be huge in this game. They've got to get him established, let him carry this team, because I'm not sure TJ Finley is going to be able to do it. He's not that great of a runner, throws the ball fairly well, and of course, based on Alabama's defensive back play lately, that might be an area Auburn needs to try to exploit, because I saw Alabama defensive backs running around like they weren't real sure where they needed to be. If Auburn can exploit that, get Tank Bigsby involved, that's going to be important for them, I believe.
It's time for another break. Coming up, we'll head to the other side of the ball. A look at both teams' defenses and full season recap straight ahead.
You're watching Iron Bowl 2021, an Alabama News Network sports special. Once again, Adam Solomon and John Longshore.
Welcome back to our Iron Bowl 2021 special coverage. John Longshore, Adam Solomon. Now, first we went offense. Now we're going to go defense. John, Auburn, 8th in yards per game this year, 4th in points per game allowed, 8th in sacks with 8, 13th in interceptions. And let's hear from him.
I think it's pretty important. Just really rushing coverage, working together. So the guys on the back end, playing top down, just giving us enough time to be able to try to get a chance to get home on a guy like him. Just guys from the second level really doing their job. Well, obviously, we don't know the scheme yet. Coach Mason will do a great job of dotting up the scheme for us to try to be successful. So I was just trying to put that plan in place, and you know, rush and coach working together to be huge in this game.
It's going to be a tough day, long day potentially for the Auburn defense against this offense.
Well, it could be, particularly if the coaches call some of the defensive schemes as they did the last 2 weeks. I mean, when a blitz is needed, you got to blitz. And that certainly was the case in the Mississippi State game. You've just got to be a little bit better prepared. You've got to be able to have a lot of different weapons at your disposal to be able to pull those cards out when need be. I think there's some athletes on this Auburn defense. I'm just not sure they've been put in the right positions over the last couple of weeks. Hopefully that will be not be the case later today, Adam, because they've got to be in the right place, right frame of mind, playing as best they can, because you just gave the numbers for Alabama's offense in the last segment. Those are pretty impressive, hard to stop. You got to be on top of your game.
Well, let's go to Alabama's defense now. Their defense seems to not be as good as years past by any means, but still near the top at the SEC in terms of the statistics. Here it is, second in yards per game allowed, third in points per game, third in sacks. They have 37. They're actually tied for third with interceptions at 12.
I've heard the crowd is going to be rocking. You know, it's going to be a live stadium. The fans are something else, but, you know, we just try to approach every game like how we get ready on Thursdays with crowd noise and everything. So I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be a good atmosphere, and we're ready for the challenge. I mean, football is about challenges. Nothing in football is easy. Football, every play is not going to be perfect play. You know, every game is not going to be a perfect game, but I think it's about how you move on in the mentality, the type of mentality you have. You know, yes, we have been in a couple of challenges this year, but I think that's what makes the game of football, and I think it's how you respond. And I think so far we responded great, and we just have to keep building on that each week. And each challenge that we get, we're just going to keep going for it and look at it in a positive way.
Well, Anderson, a guy that's been on or is on finalist awards list earlier in this week. So what do you think the defense is going to do against Auburn offense?
Well, I think he needs to have a big day. He normally does. Will Anderson, that leader on defense. It's interesting, Adam, those statistics that you put up there. You're right. They're not bad at all. Only problem is Alabama fans expect them all to be number one, not number 3. And maybe that's the difference here because, you know, the defense has played well. The numbers backed it up, but maybe not up to some of the championship teams that Alabama has had. We talked about the secondary the last couple of weeks. There seems to be some confusion. I know there's been a lot of different rotations in that defensive backfield, but that's going to be key because TJ Finley does throw the ball pretty well, and they're going to have to be ready for it. I think that Henry Toa played well last week, had a lot of solo tackles against Arkansas. He needs to step up. We know Will Anderson's going to play, and if that defensive line can get into that Auburn backfield, that's not going to be good for the Tigers.
All right, coming up, we'll talk a little quarterback action, and we'll bring in reporter Chris Adams-Wall. Chris will break down how Alabama got to this point. That's coming up later.
You're watching Iron Bowl 2021, an Alabama News Network sports special. Once again, Adam Solomon and John Longshore.
Welcome back to our Iron Bowl 2021 coverage. John Longshore. John, it's been a very different year at the quarterback position for Alabama and Auburn. And we'll start with the Auburn Tigers. Bo Nix had an up and down year. He's out. TJ Finley will look to prove himself against Alabama.
You know, Auburn really has a good team. You know, they've had some close losses. They've had some tough injuries. But I think TJ Finley is a very good, capable quarterback who can make plays. He's big, he's got a strong arm, he's accurate with the ball. He's been in the offense all year long. He's got some experience.
Difference, I think the difference is here at Auburn, it's an Iron Bowl. You know, at LSU, it's just a rivalry game, but here it's something much more special, and to be a part of it is an unbelievable experience. You know, I never paid attention. When I was at LSU, I never paid attention to other teams' schedules and other teams' you know, traditions and rituals and things of that nature. So, you know, when I came here and I was introduced to the Iron Bowl, I was pretty shocked, you know, that this game was so special and things like that. So just to be able to be starting in this game is a unbelievable experience, and I can't wait.
Now, John, Bo Nix obviously made some amazing plays throughout the year, and a lot of the time he was maybe getting some blame that shouldn't necessarily been directed at him. But now it's the TJ Finley show, and as you saw, Finley getting educated on just what the Iron Bowl means down here.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we really have a big enough sample size on TJ Finley as the starting quarterback at Auburn. We certainly saw him down in LSU. As a matter of fact, he faced this Alabama team when he was at LSU. So the Crimson Tide does have some familiarity with TJ Finley. But we do know he can throw the football really, really well. He's pretty accurate with it. Not as much of an elusive runner as Bo Nix was, getting out of trouble with his feet. I'm sure Alabama's going to try to exploit that. But Auburn's wide receivers, really kind of been middle of the pack this year, Adam. They're going to need to step up. Kobe Hudson and the rest of these guys, the tight ends, something that we've been hearing more and more about, going to be a part of this Auburn offense. Weren't so much when Gus Malzahn was there. I think it'd be big for this Auburn team. But it does seem to me that TJ Finley is not, the moment's not too big for him. I think getting into this Iron Bowl is something that he will be able to handle. Obviously, there have been some big games, some big crowds in Baton Rouge. He's seen the ones at Auburn, and certainly to his advantage, Adam, that this Iron Bowl is going to be played at Jordan-Hare Stadium.
For sure. On the other end of the spectrum, Alabama quarterback Bryce Young has been named a finalist for the Maxwell Award as the best overall player, the Davey O'Brien Award for the top quarterback, second in the SEC in passing yards, fewest interceptions with 3, and the most passing scores with 38.
I think there's still a lot of room for me to improve. I think there's obviously positives and negatives, that you take away from every game, individually and collectively as a team, as a unit, all that. So I feel like for me, it's there are positives that I want to continue, and then there's stuff that I see on film that I want to correct and get right and grow in those areas. So for me, it's I'm just focusing on the things I didn't do as well, and still trying to improve. And we are as offense and as a team still all working each and every day to try to reach our full potential.
Oh, most definitely. I knew from the first time I met Bryce at All-American, I knew he was going to be a Heisman contender. Bryce is very smart. I'm pretty sure you guys can see on the field, but outside, I've had classes with Bryce, everything. Bryce is a smart person, and his ability in the football field is even more surprising. He's very smart on the field. The numbers that he's putting up, the stats that he have this year, everything of how he handled everything, especially last year. I feel like he's a great person on and off the field, and he's very, 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 very talented.
I think we're all equally as impressed with Bryce Young as Will Anderson is. But I mentioned the stats, and watching the guy play, he gets it. And he seems, like we talked about with TJ Finley, Bryce seems calm, ready for this Iron Bowl.
Well, I was thinking, Adam, when we were playing those clips, I don't think I've seen an Iron Bowl that featured two quarterbacks as soft-spoken as those two guys are. Not real rah-rah. They let their talking be done on the playing field, but the numbers back it up. There's no doubt. And heck, Will Anderson looks like Bryce Young's Heisman campaign manager. And it's certainly a game this afternoon in Auburn. If he picks up big numbers next week over in Atlanta, could certainly help him out on 2 huge stages for his Heisman run. But I can promise you, Adam, it's not about the Heisman with Bryce Young. It's about winning and getting to the college football playoff. He's from California, but he knows how big this Iron Bowl is just by talking to his teammates, seeing it from the fans, going on the road, playing at Jordan-Hare. Going to be a huge atmosphere this afternoon, and I think Bryce Young will be able to handle the moment as well. His numbers certainly prove that out, and he's got the weapons at his disposal to move the chains and to score touchdowns.
It looks like it'll be another chance for him to impress the Heisman Committee down the stretch. Now, coming up next in sports, we'll catch up with Brian Harsin. Once again, the former Boise State top dog reflects now being a part of the Iron Bowl.
You're watching Iron Bowl 2021, an Alabama News Network sports special. Once again, Adam Solomon and John Longshore.
Welcome back to Iron Bowl 2021. Now, you've seen a lot of Iron Bowls, John, and for Brian Harsin, this will be the first one that he's actually been a part of. But even coming from way out west, Harsin's still aware of what this game means to the fans, to the school, and give himself some more leeway if other games didn't go as well like they did this year.
Brian Harsin has done a really good job, I think, with this team. They present a lot of multiples on offense that are difficult to defend. They have a very good core of wide receivers, a lot of guys that have a lot of catches. They've got good tight ends. Their defense has played extremely well all year long. They're physical. They're very aggressive in the way they play. They create a lot of negative plays for the offense. and these guys are always good on special teams. I know they lost a great kicker, but their punter is really, really good. They got good returners. They play well on teams. So all the way around, this is a really, really good team.
The best advice I've got from people in the community or other folks that have been a part of it. Well, I'll say this. The first question I was asked after I did my press conference on Christmas Eve was about the Iron Bowl, which I think at that time was about 340 days away. So here we are. That's one of the things that personally, I look back on, and after I finished everything I had to say, that was the first question I had. So that made it very clear how important this is.
Now, obviously, John Harsin seems to get it. Do you remember offhand how many Iron Bowls you have covered, John?
Adam, that's interesting. Earlier this week on the radio side, I had a guest who will be going to his 50th straight Iron Bowl. His first one, he was 5 years old. I was actually at that game, too. It was my first one. It was what was known as the Bama punt game when Auburn blocked 2 punts to beat Alabama 17-16. So I would say from that game in 1972 to this one this afternoon, I haven't been to every one, but I think I've been to about 40 of them. I've been to quite a few Iron Bowls in my day.
What do you think a guy from out west how much can he really appreciate this game until he plays it?
He won't really fully grasp this game till Monday, and into the next week. Sure. And he'll realize, man, this is really, really important. Win or lose, he is going to get a feeling like he has not experienced anywhere else. And he's heard about it. But, Adam, unless you've lived it and you've seen it and you've looked across the field and seen your in-state rival standing there, that's when it will fully absorb for Brian Harsin.
That's right. It's one thing to be asked about it in your introductory press conference and to prepare for it, but until you've actually coached on the sidelines for the game, it's really just hard to tell and just appreciate all of it. Well, it's time for another quick break. Straight ahead, we'll talk John's keys to victory for both teams. Chris Adams-Wall will join us. Full season recaps for both Auburn and Alabama as well.
You're watching Iron Bowl 2021, an Alabama News Network sports special. Once again, Adam Solomon and John Longshore.
Welcome back to our Iron Bowl coverage of 2021. For the past hour or so, John, we've broken down everything possible about both Auburn and Alabama. Now, John, let's go over what you think it will take for each team to get a win today out on the gridiron. First, your keys to victory for Alabama.
Yeah, Adam, we've talked about it this hour. They've just got to have better play in the defensive backfield. Last week against Arkansas was just atrocious. Wasn't real good against LSU as well. Kind of been a question mark all season long. Of course, that's an area in which Nick Saban kind of prides himself on. That's an area of the defense that he works with a lot. The DB's got to play better. I think going to Jordan-Hare Stadium in such a hostile environment, and granted, they're kind of limping into this game, we get it, but that fan base, that team, they know what's at stake here. If Alabama can score first, kind of quiet things down, settle things down, put the pressure back on Auburn, I think that's huge for Alabama. And if they can score their first 2 or 3 series, wow, watch out, could get ugly.
Yep.
And there again, they've just got to rattle T.J. Finley. We haven't seen a lot out of him as an Auburn quarterback. Mop up earlier in the year to win the game against Georgia Southern. And then, of course, when Bo Nix got injured, he's taken over. But he's had a long while to think about, wow, I'm going to be the starting quarterback in the Iron Bowl.
Yeah, it's time for the Iron Bowl now. All right, maybe some more obvious for what Alabama has to do after the way their season's going. But what about the keys to victory for Auburn to pull the upset?
Yeah, it's interesting, and we talked about Tank Bigsby. I'm still shaking my head, Adam. I don't know what was going on in Columbia, South Carolina last week when they were not feeding Tank Bigsby. But, I mean, is it too wild to imagine that he could get 30-plus carries? I mean, is that what he's going to need to do? I kind of think so. You got to put the game on his back, see if Alabama can stop him, contain him. I want to see it. I mean, let me see what this guy can do.
We've seen the quarterbacks, John. Why not Tank Bigsby?
Sure. So I think, give me more Tank Bigsby. Obviously, they can't turn the ball over, Adam. They cannot give Alabama free possessions. So fumbles, interceptions, any type of turnover, they're going to have to hold on to the ball, and they're going to have to turn the ball over and win that, get Alabama's turnovers and win that battle. And then, of course, making Alabama one-dimensional. You know, maybe that's not so good because if that one dimension is Bryce Young throwing, because the running game has not been that good, Bryce Young has proven he can carve you up. So maybe if they make Alabama one-dimensional running the game and containing Bryce Young, that certainly would go a long way. Easier said than done. I think Alabama's keys are a little bit more obtainable than Auburn's. But there again, in this game, we've seen some crazy things happen. If Auburn can get these three things in the plus column, I think they might have a good shot.
Yeah, and usually one-dimensional, it doesn't matter. But with Alabama, they've shown that if you make them pass the ball, it could still go south for you, even if their rushing game isn't working. All right, it's time for another break. Coming up, college football playoff scenarios. John will give his predictions and a full season recap of Alabama and Auburn.
You're watching Iron Bowl 2021, an Alabama News Network sports special. Once again, Adam Solomon and John Longshore.
Welcome back to our Iron Bowl special. John, it's time we bring in the third member of our broadcast today. They've seen our faces for most of the time, but sports reporter and lover of season recaps, Chris Adams-Wall joins us. Chris, what do you got?
Yeah, Adam, thanks. Alabama began their 2021 season as defending national champions. Of course, they were led once again by 15-year head coach Nick Saban. The Crimson Tide started the 2021 campaign as the #1 team in the nation in its first game of the season against then number 14 Miami in the Chick-fil-A kickoff game in Atlanta on September 4th.
The clash at Mercedes-Benz Stadium turned out to be a pretty straightforward victory for Alabama in what was Bryce Young's first start for the team. The sophomore quarterback threw for 344 yards and 4 touchdowns as the Tide rolled 44-13. The Week 1 thrashing of the Hurricanes was followed up by Alabama's first home game of the season and another convincing victory, this time a 48-14 win over the visiting Mercer Bears. Jace McClellan returned a blocked punt for a touchdown to open the scoring, and the Tide did not look back. Young threw for 227 yards and 3 touchdowns as Alabama improved to 2-0. Up next was a trip to the Swamp to take on what was then the number 11 ranked Florida Gators. This game proved to be the Tide's first real test of the season. Alabama led 21-9 at halftime, but the Gators came back in the second half and got it to within 2 at 31-29, but the Tide held off Dan Mullen and company in the end by the same score. Young threw 3 more touchdowns, and Brian Robinson had 2 of his own, one on the ground and the other on the receiving end, as Alabama escaped Gainesville with the 2-point win to go to 3-0. The Tide got a breather in their final game of September as the Golden Eagles of Southern Miss came to Bryant-Denny Stadium on the 25th. Jamison Williams scored not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns longer than 80 yards in Alabama's 63-14 drubbing of USM. Williams opened the game with a 100-yard kickoff return, then caught an 81-yard touchdown on his second touch, and finally had another kickoff return, this one an 83-yarder. Young was nearly flawless, going 20 for 22 for 313 yards and a career-high 5 touchdown passes, and the Tide were 4-0 after besting Brett Favre's alma mater. First week of October, Lane Kiffin and his then number 12-ranked Ole Miss Rebels rolled into Tuscaloosa to try to ruin the Tide's hitherto perfect run. Suffice it to say, they did not. Alabama led 28-0 at halftime and wound up taking it handily 42-21. Brian Robinson had his best game of the season, rushing for 171 yards and 4 touchdowns as the Tide improved to 5-0. Next up for the Tide was a trip to College Station against Jimbo Fisher's unranked Texas A&M Aggies, which proved to be Alabama's biggest challenge yet. The Tide scored the game's first touchdown but trailed at the half 17-7. But Alabama would come back and took a 38-31 lead with 5 minutes to go in the game, but could not hold on. A&M battled back, tied the game at 38, and then Seth Small's 28-yard field goal at the end of regulation handed Alabama their first and only loss of the year, and A&M's shocking 41-38 victory. But Saban's boys would bounce back the following week in Starkville against Mike Leach's Mississippi State Bulldogs. Young threw for 348 yards and 4 touchdowns, and Jordan Battle had a 40-yard pick six as the Tide rolled all over the Bulldogs 49-9. The Tennessee Volunteers came to town the next week on the 23rd of October and jumped out to a surprising 14-7 lead at the end of the first quarter. Alabama would slowly start to pull away, however, as Young threw for 371 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Robinson rushed for 107 yards and 3 scores. This one was not as straightforward as many Alabama fans probably predicted it would be, but the Tide ultimately pulled away and took care of the Vols in this one, 52-24, to improve to 7-1 heading into a bye week. The following week was the return of Eddie O and LSU, Ed Orgeron's final game against Alabama as the Tigers head coach. And LSU entered as big underdogs but gave Alabama all they could handle. The Tide trailed the Tigers 7-0 at the end of the first quarter and didn't score until just before halftime. The game came down to an LSU Hail Mary, but a flag was called on the play, and Alabama survived the scare, taking this one 20-14 in what was the team's first game in the month of November. The Tide remained at Bryant-Denny Stadium the following week as a 1-8 New Mexico State team came to town. And the second Aggies team the Tide faced this season actually had a 3-0 lead in this one, but then the floodgates opened up. Young carved up New Mexico State with 270 yards through the air and tied a career high with 5 touchdown passes. Jamison Williams added 6 catches for 158 yards and 3 scores as the Tide cruised to a 59-3 win. And last week, the Crimson Tide hosted number 21 Arkansas, and while this one was a little too close for comfort, Young and Williams both went off. Young set the Alabama single-game passing yards record with 559 and 5 touchdowns, while Williams hauled in 8 catches for 190 yards and 3 touchdowns. The 42-35 victory over the Razorbacks ensured the Crimson Tide a date with the Georgia Bulldogs in the SEC Championship game on December 4th.
All right, John, there you see it. A complete rundown. Any favorite moment or anything that will stand out for you from this season?
Man, you know, Adam, so many great moments for this Alabama team, particularly offensively. But I got a zinger for you. I liked when I saw Paul Tyson get in the game, the backup quarterback.
Yes.
Bryce Young on the bench, not getting hurt. I grew up with Paul's dad here in Montgomery, so when I can see one of my friend's sons get in the game, it's always nice.
Hey, there you go. Well, we're coming up. We're going to take another break. We'll turn to Auburn. Much of the same. We're going to get a full recap from their season as well.
You're watching Iron Bowl 2021, an Alabama News Network sports special. Once again, Adam Solomon and John Longshore.
Welcome back to our Iron Bowl 2021 coverage. John Longshore. John, let's bring back Chris Adams-Wall, shall we? He watched every minute of every single Auburn game this season, twice over, John. Wow. He can't get enough. He broke it all down. Chris.
Let's make that thrice, okay, Adam? Auburn's 2021 season was the first of the Brian Harsin era. The 44-year-old Boise, Idaho native and Auburn fans had very high hopes for the Tigers behind junior quarterback Bo Nix, despite the team being unranked at the beginning of the season.
And it didn't take long for the Harsin era to start off with a bang either, as the Tigers gave their new head coach a dominant debut with a 60-10 trouncing over the Akron Zips. This was back on the Plains on September 4th. Nix finished the game 20 for 22 with 275 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Tank Bigsby led the ground attack with 119 yards and 2 touchdowns as Auburn's season got off to a sizzling start. Next on the docket for the Tigers was Montgomery's own Alabama State. And then number 25 Auburn had no problem taking the sting out of the Hornets, breaking the 60-point threshold for the second straight week in a 62-0 beatdown of Alabama State. Demetrius Robertson finished the game with 3 touchdowns, and Jarquez Hunter tallied 147 rushing yards and a score, and Auburn was 2-0 after 2 weeks. Week 3 saw the Tigers' first major test of the season as they traveled to Happy Valley to take on the number 10-seeded Penn State Nittany Lions. The Tigers took a 10-7 lead at the start of the second quarter, but that was the Tigers' last lead of the game as the Nittany Lions pulled away at the very end and won this one 28-20. Tank Bigsby had 23 carries for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns in the losing effort as Auburn suffered their first defeat of 2021. Following the loss at State College, the Tigers still found themselves in the top 25, ranked 23rd with a home date against Georgia State. And the Panthers came to play. They led the Tigers 24-12 at the half, stunning the crowd at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Nix was even benched in this game in favor of TJ Findley, and Auburn eventually rallied late in the second half behind the backup quarterback, who went 9 for 16 for 97 yards and a touchdown pass. Auburn also returned a blocked punt and an interception for touchdowns, and it was crisis averted at the end of the day as Auburn hung on for the 34-24 win. Nix was back under center the next week as the Tigers traveled to Death Valley to take on the other Tigers of LSU. Auburn trailed 13-0 midway through the second quarter, but that set the stage for the comeback and one of the plays of the season from Nix. Auburn was down 19-10 late in the third quarter, but Bo Nix's 5-yard touchdown run in the fourth and Jarquez Hunter's 1-yard touchdown with 3:11 remaining in the game catapulted Auburn to its first win at LSU since 1999. 24-19 the final score. Nix had 255 passing yards and 74 yards on the ground. Auburn's memorable win at LSU vaulted the Tigers to 18th in the nation for their home showdown with number 2 Georgia on October 9th. But the unbeaten Bulldogs proved to be too much for the Tigers in this one, winning handily at Jordan-Hare Stadium 34-10. Tank Bigsby had a rushing touchdown in Auburn's first SEC loss of the season. Now unranked, the Tigers look to rebound against number 17 Arkansas on a trip to the Ozarks the next week. Auburn trailed early third quarter 17-14 before a fumble recovery in the end zone put the Tigers ahead for good. Nix found Robertson for a 71-yard touchdown and then put the proverbial cherry on top with a 23-yard touchdown scamper as the Tigers bounced back with an impressive 38-23 victory over Arkansas and headed into a bye week. After a week off, the Tigers resumed their season, hosting then number 10 Ole Miss, and Auburn ran all over the Rebels in this one. Bo Nix had a couple of rushing touchdowns and another through the air, and Tank Bigsby had 23 rushes for 140 yards and a score as the Tigers' hot streak continued with a 31-20 victory at Jordan-Hare Stadium to move them to 3-1 in conference and 6-2 overall. Now 13th in the nation, Auburn tried to keep the momentum going the following week in College Station against number 14 Texas A&M, but this one was a struggle for both parties. It was only 3-3 at halftime, and Anders Carlson missed a field goal that would have put Auburn up 6-3 in the third quarter. Michael Clemens finally scored the game's only touchdown on a 24-yard fumble return early in the fourth quarter as the Aggies took this one 20-3. Auburn looked a lot better on offense the next week at home against Mississippi State, at least in the first half. The Tigers led the Bulldogs at one point 28-3, but as we know, thanks to the Atlanta Falcons, a lead like that is never safe. Mississippi State rallied back and handed the Tigers their worst collapse in school history. 43-34 was the final score, and if the gut-wrenching defeat wasn't enough, Auburn also lost Nix for the season with a broken ankle. Next up for the Tigers was a trip to Columbia, where TJ Findley was back under center. Auburn jumped out to a 14-0 lead, but squandered it, and a controversial play on a South Carolina punt late in the game gave the ball right back to the Gamecocks, who ended up taking this one 21-17, handing Auburn their third consecutive defeat.
6-2 start to the year, John. 3 straight losses. Anything, your most memorable moment for the Auburn Tigers from this year?
Yeah, you know, Adam, I'm still trying to figure out how did they lose to Penn State and how did they beat Georgia State? Those two games, I was looking at the clips, thinking back at it, going, wow, man, they dodged some bullets there. I didn't think they played well in Happy Valley, should have won that game. That game probably sticks out more than any for this Auburn team this year.
All right, we just saw how Auburn and Alabama got to this point. Coming up after the break, we'll take a look at college football playoff scenarios, and John will give his final predictions.
You're watching Iron Bowl 2021, an Alabama News Network sports special. Once again, Adam Solomon and John Longshore.
Welcome back for the final time to our Iron Bowl 2021 hour-long special. And John, I can't believe it, but we are almost done here. One thing I want to talk about, though, before we get to your predictions, which will close us out, is the college football playoff implications. Year in and year out, this game always has a lot of them, usually for Alabama. Now, Alabama, in my opinion, has to win this game. A lot of people's opinion, as Ohio State did pass them for the 2 spot, but the Buckeyes, they do play number 5 Michigan today, so that will essentially take care of itself to some extent. Alabama and Georgia will get real interesting if Alabama does end up beating Auburn and then beats the Bulldogs. Notre Dame's just waiting there, John. What if Alabama loses to Auburn and then beats Georgia? How do you think this plays out for Alabama at the end of the day? I mean, I guess there's 100 different scenarios.
Oh, there's there's a lot of scenarios.
Let's start with Alabama beats Auburn and then beats Georgia. Are they both in, Georgia and Alabama?
If Alabama beats Georgia, they're both in.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely think that. I think that's Alabama's only path is they've got to beat Georgia in the SEC championship game.
And you think Georgia will stay in at that point as
well?
I
do, unless it's a complete blowout,
yes.
Which I don't imagine that happening. But I think if it's a game of 7 points, maybe even 10 or less, if Georgia loses, they're still in. Their body of work will allow them to be in the playoff. But I think Alabama's got to win today. They got to win in Atlanta next week to get into the playoff.
And I think what a lot of people don't want to see is Alabama win out, get the 1 seed potentially, and then somehow Notre Dame sneaks in there at number 4, and we get another Alabama 30-point win against Notre Dame.
You might not be. I'm older than you, Adam, and you're too young to remember. Notre Dame could jump 10 spots and get into the national championship
on a bye week.
Yeah, on a bye week, or they'd win the national title from 5th to jump from 5 to 1. So watch out for Notre Dame. They're going to win out their regular season. They don't have a conference title game to play in.
Sure.
But Notre Dame's kind of creeping around back there, so you always have to keep an eye out on them.
Now, are you rooting for Cincinnati to make it in?
I kind of am, because I think if we do get Cincinnati in, Adam, the drum beat's going to get even louder about expanding the playoff, which I've been a big proponent of. So let them all in. Just have as much chaos as possible to expand this playoff.
All right, John, we're essentially out of time. We've broke it all down. Who do you think is going to win the game today?
You know, Adam, with everything that we've laid out during this hour, and we've seen these teams play all season long, I just think Alabama's the stronger team. They've got actually more to play for today. And I think if they jump out early, it's going to be bad for Auburn. I think at the end of the game, I think Alabama wins it 48-20. 48-20.
There you go. Thanks for watching our Alabama News Network special Iron Bowl 2021. Remember, kickoffs at 2:30 right here on CBS 8. I'm Adam Solomon for John Longshore and Chris Adams as well, and everyone here at Alabama News Network. Have a great afternoon.